Breaking the cycle to step forward. Authentic conversations from lived experience and a professional perspective in overcoming abuse with Chris Tuck and Beverly Ann.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Breaking the Cycle to Step Forward podcast with myself, Chris Tuck, and the lovely...
Hello, it's Beverly Ann.
It is indeed Beverly Ann. So today's podcast is Have You Got 5 Minutes? And this came around, people just always asking us, Bev, don't they? Have you got 5 minutes? Can I just discuss this with you? Can I just have your view on this? What do you think about this? So we thought once a month we would just dedicate a podcast to Have You Got 5 Minutes? Now, we are talking today, Bev, about someone who's been in contact with you after attending one of your courses back in 2019 in regard to ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experiences. Now, she said she'd had time to think about what you have said, so it must have been very in-depth and very thought-provoking, as always. So she's come back to you with some more questions. Can you tell us a little bit more about this? And this is what's going to be informing our conversation today.
Yes, absolutely. And she came across some of the papers, etc. I don't know if you do this. I do that as well. You file things away, don't you? And then whether it be online, you file it away, or actual papers, and you come across it and you start reading through it. I know I do that with old slides sometimes, and that's what she had done. And she contacted me. She's another professional in a different field, and she just wanted to ask some questions that also now she's got some relatable experience in her own personal world, and sometimes it takes that time to actually be able to put it into context.
Yeah, when you come across that lived experience, you can definitely put it into context, can't you?
Yes. So she asked some other questions and I responded, and it was all around children, grandparenting as a grandparent, but children then in general going forward.
What about children?
So first of all, it was about parenting. So we're not going to go into that too much because thinking of the time and some of the great questions that she followed up with, because I mentioned that we've got the podcast and I got her permission. So I'm not going to say names to keep people's identity private, because, that's important. But some of these questions that she came back with, I personally feel, and I know we've been talking about this, these are some good questions that people want to ask. And that's what we like about this conversation, and not everybody is sure. So unless we ask, how do we know?
So what did she ask you in regards to children and being a parent, grandparent? What are the questions that she's asked you that absolutely got you sort of like, oh yes, I want to answer this?
So in the background, it's based on about children having freedom. So when we were growing up, we would be going out of the house and not coming back till later. And are we overprotective? But then I was able to counter that and say, well, actually, children have freedom in a different way because they have access. And this is something we've spoken about numerous times online, and it's something that we need to be aware of. So that's why I'm not going to go into that too much, because we've been there. But I was talking about choices, etc. And she came back and she said, how does choice help build boundaries?
Yeah. And what was your answer to that? How does choice build boundaries?
Well, I believe, because I've not responded to her, so she's going to be hearing all these answers for her. I believe that if we are able to enable choice for children, even from a very young age, they are then able to learn what's important to them, because they're thinking about what's right for them rather than just following along with what they've got to do. And for instance, my son, at an early age, even at the age of 2, always wanted to make a choice of what he wanted to wear. So rather than taking out the whole of the wardrobe, because as a mum, I've spent time washing, ironing, putting it away. What I used to do was take out 2 outfits and say, well, what's your choice? What do you want to wear? And even if you wanted to take something from that outfit and something from that outfit, fine. That way, he was making a choice, and it was helping him to understand what was important to him in that context.
Mm-hmm. So
Yeah.
when it comes to safeguarding children, how could we put choice or use choice to build boundaries and better protect?
Well, when we come back to safeguarding, and this is something that we've spoken about before, rather than just telling a child that they have to give us a hug, we can say, would you like a hug? You can put your arms out and would you like a hug? They have a choice then. Now, if they say no, okay, that's okay. What they learn is, if they say no and your response is out of anger or, well, that's okay, I won't hug you, then they're learning that, oh, if I say no, I'm going to get a negative response. Whereas if you say, like, even to a 2-year-old toddler, would you like a hug? And they say, no, I don't. Okay, I'm here for you when you're ready. So you're enabling them to make that choice and
it's,
understand their boundary.
that response is really important, because as you said, if it's almost wounded, like, you're a child, I'm the adult, and I say, do you want a hug? And then you say no. As a wounded adult, I could be quite aggressive back in my verbal response and go, well, okay, well, when you want a hug, I'm not going to be there for you, sort of thing. And there are a lot of adults that actually do that kind of behavior. I've done it before myself, before I pulled myself up about it and understood that actually you're communicating anger and disappointment back to that child. If we want to try and help them build boundaries around this and have that choice and have their choice respected, then we as the adult, we need to respond in the right way and do it as you have described, not how I've described.
And I'm a human being. Please, anyone listening, don't think that that I've never reacted like that. But it's okay also if they are being horrible to say, because let's be honest, as much as we love our children can react in a way that hurts us. And it's okay to communicate that as well. It's okay. So for instance, if they're making a choice and they're saying some horrible things to you, oh, that feels hurtful to me. That makes me feel really sad.
But I think, again, you're teaching them, especially if they're younger, you're teaching them that actually their behavior and their response to you can be hurtful. So as long as you're doing it in a way of teaching them that what they've done is hurtful, that's all part of the learning, and that in my book, it is really good for them to know, because how would they know about their behavior and it being hurtful if you don't actually tell them, but tell them in a loving, caring, nurturing way rather than an abusive, aggressive way?
Yeah, exactly. And let's be honest, our children get older and they become teenagers. And yes, when we're working, because many of us are having to work, there's extra stresses around, and there are times we're human beings, so this is no finger pointing, because there are times maybe of an evening when I've had enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go away. I don't like your attitude towards me. I need space.
But again, you're clearly communicating your needs, and again will teach them to communicate their needs in a more constructive way.
Yeah, and it's listening when they're in that way. So,
Yes.
they want their space. Okay,
Yeah.
you're making your choice. I understand your boundaries.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I mean, we started
ways.
Absolutely. So we started off really young, and I think that's important, because sometimes people think that we're going to speak to a 2-year-old in the same way that we're going to speak to a 13 or 14-year-old. You know, it's got to be age appropriate.
Yeah, absolutely. But we can start doing all of this from a very young age. So going
Yes.
back to the question, what other things were you asked?
Well, the questions actually lead on quite nicely, because the next one is, does choice empower or does it overwhelm?
Mm-hmm.
Which I thought was a really good question,
Yeah.
because I personally believe that I remember feeling or growing up and not having choices. That was either I was living at home with my parents in that environment where there was no choice.
You just had to do what you were told, yeah.
Yeah. And it was a case of survival because it was a toxic environment. Then going into a children's home, as much as I enjoyed it, you know,
Mm-hmm.
there are some things that are become every day that you don't think about. And it's only as an adult in conversations looking back, like you don't have the opportunity to lay in. Well, in my day in our children's home, you had to be up to get ready to have breakfast at a certain time.
So there was all of these expectations and rules in place that couldn't be breached.
Yeah, and I understand why. When
Mhm.
you've got 18 children in a
Yeah,
household, you know, there has to be that order.
yeah,
But in a normal, or say in an everyday household, you know, if you're 13, 14 and it's a Sunday morning and you don't want breakfast, generally, not in every
yeah,
household, generally it's like, okay, stay in bed.
yeah,
So I grew up without choice. So
yes.
I am a big advocate about giving choice. And I personally believe that if we enable people to have choice, it empowers them to learn what's important for them. However, it's also being aware of being age related and does it overwhelm. So there are some scenarios that if the choice is too vast,
Mm-hmm.
so let's have a think, you know, like food wise, let's be honest. If we've got a young child and we're saying, well, what do you want to eat? That can sometimes be very overwhelming. So if we're breaking it down, and I'm trying to bring it down so it's simple, if we bring it down so it's a smaller choice, as in, well, we're going to have dinner tonight. Would you like this or would you like that?
Yeah. So a spaghetti bolognese or a shepherd's pie because it's all mince based because we're having mince tonight. Which one do you want?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. To be very simple. I also think even as adults, when we've had participants on a course and I say, you say, you have choice. The amount of adults that look at us as if we're just spoken a foreign language for
Mm,
them is amazing because a lot of people, because they haven't had choice throughout their life, think that they don't have a choice. And when you say that to them and give them the option of A, B, or C, they really can't deal with that. It's overwhelming for them. So even though we're saying it's got to be age appropriate, some adults don't even understand or know that they have choice as an adult. They don't have to, for example, stay in a toxic relationship. As an adult, you do have choice because they've been brought up in a certain way, like us, where we didn't have choice and we had to do as we were told because we were abused if we did or we didn't. That has carried on for them in their as young people and as young adults. And even now, sitting in a room in front of us, they still feel constrained by their lived experiences today, and they not have never experienced choice and still don't feel like they have choice. And most of them do, and once you've explained and they come around to the concept, they can grasp it and move on with it. But if people are still in abusive situations right now, they may not have choice that is tangible. However, they could work with outside agencies to get that choice to be actionable, i.e. leaving an abusive relationship. They might not see how they can do it, but with help and support and guidance from professionals, that can become a reality for them.
Absolutely. And I remember when I very much felt overwhelmed, and I was being given a choice of something really lovely, to go somewhere or not. And I remember getting the phone call, and it was after I got divorced, and it was like, would you like to go? And I was like, whoa, let me come back to you. And I literally had to go for a walk and think about it, and then think, okay, what are your choices? If you don't go, how will you feel? And
Yeah.
if you do go, how will you feel?
And
then it was like, okay, so you've got both choices. If you choose not to go, who will you blame? And if you do choose to go and you don't enjoy it, who will you blame? And I was like, well, myself in both. in both.
yeah.
Okay, so what is it you want to do? And
Yeah.
when I realised there was going to be no comeback, then it was a safe place and a safe choice, I was able to make that choice and then carry on from there.
I was going to say, a lot of what you've just said comes from a place of fear and
Yes.
not understanding, or at that moment in time, because you recoiled and you was like, oh, don't know about this. It's just like you're fearful of not understanding the parameters around each choice. But once you actually logically sat back and looked at your choices, and that there was no comeback other than yourself, and it was safe for you to make those decisions, you were able to do that. So I think there's a lot of unpicking and learning in all of this.
Absolutely. So I'm a big believer, go back to schools. Yes, we can't allow I say can't. Most children don't have an input into their infants or juniors, because age related, that,
What do
it
you mean
doesn't
by
happen like that.
input?
So we don't say to our children, what infant school would you like to go to? Generically, it tends to happen. However, when it came to senior school, I very much wanted my children to make that choice, because, it's about how do they learn? How do they learn? And, one of my siblings wanted to go to school A, and I said, like, okay, but you also need to look at another school, so you've got something to compare. I don't care which school it is, I want you to have a choice. And even back then, ironically, after they looked at another school to compare, they decided to go to school B, and they felt that school A wasn't right for them. And they actually did, they enjoyed the school. My other I said sibling, my other
You did, your
child.
child.
My other child, when they made their decision, they actually didn't get the first choice or the second choice. They got the third choice. And it took a while to settle in. But when they did extremely well. And they got the best from it. So I've always been a big advocate of enabling my children to have the choice where's possible. And I think it's very important for children where possible.
Yeah, because it's not always possible, is it? When they're in a place, or something's going to put them in danger, you don't always have the time to
No.
give them the choice. It's like a no's a no, that's it. We don't want you doing that, and we don't want to put you in danger. So a no's a no. Going back to that question from that lady about a playing outside, when we spoke off camera about this, the lady was saying, wasn't she, that it's safer to be indoors. So that's why a lot of parents like their children to be indoors. And what did you say to me about being online?
Well, if your child's indoors and they're at home and they're online, they've actually got access to a wider place than they have if they're outside. So think of a scenario. If I was to, I live in a close, so at an age appropriate time, I would allow my child to play outside, but I'd be watching. Yeah. Now that's scary. And as I used to say to my children, any decision I make, I have to be comfortable with that, because I know that I can't stop you from doing things, but I have to be able to live with the consequences, regard whatever way they are. So God forbid something horrible happened, I have to know that I was comfortable with the choice I made at that time on behalf of their safety, because it goes both ways. But sometimes, because we have our children indoors, we believe they're in the house. They're upstairs in their bedroom.
No harm's going to come to them.
No, they're playing a game. They're online. They're fine. And sadly, that's not always true. Now, as we always say, and this isn't about witch hunting, it's about being aware. Because, you know, I know even a conversation the other day, someone bought their 5-year-old daughter an iPhone 12.
Right.
Now, I straight away, I was like, whoa.
Yeah. Why?
And then they were a little bit upset because she'd lost it within an hour of receiving it. But when you look at it, it's a mini computer. She's got access to everything. And yes, there are parental locks, etc. But it's still very scary, because what you're accessing, you open the door to everything. The whole world. Yeah.
And to be blunt, Bev, there are many parents who don't know about parent locks and don't screen what their children are looking at. They just don't. I know I was one of them. Yeah. My children are a lot older now, but even as they were growing up, my son would say, I'm just playing this game, Mum. And I go, oh, okay, what age is it? And he'd go to me at 15 and he'd be 14 or 13. I go, okay, that's all right. And then when he was 15, what age is the game? Oh, it's an 18. And I go, oh, you know, he's a sensible lad. He'd be all right. So he was playing. So I know for a fact that if I'm doing it, and I'm a very risk adverse person, and if I was to describe my parenting over the years, I would say wrap my children up in cotton wool. That would be me. I would be over cautious about everything and anything to try and minimize them coming to harm. So I was a bit blasé when it comes to things like their games, because they're sensible children. But there are so many parents out there that don't know about the risks. They don't know about controls, and they would never ask their children, what are you up to? Who are you speaking to?
And in all fairness, that context of game, you know, I remember a scenario, you know, talking about video games, etc. And they're more online now, but even back then when you bought the cassettes, it's different now because age.
Because we are dinosaurs.
But I remember going to a friend's with one of my children and with their game, and my friend's husband was playing the game, and afterwards he was recalling all this stuff, and I was like, what are you talking about? He was like, oh, the game they play is really, really good. And I'm like, what? And I was shocked because
about the contents.
Because the word game, it didn't even trigger. I would never have let my son watch an 18-year-old film. Yet it really hadn't
resonated
because it was a game. And you know, and so I was always aware there. But when it came to also online, so MSN and
we're showing we're dinosaurs.
I educated myself on having a look at the chats. Do you see what I mean? However, when my children realised that I could access it, they were one step ahead because it was always so easy. And there was another thing, Bebo or something like that before Facebook. I know, that's where we're going. And they did that thing where it was just there on the screen. And we're talking about computers here, not even laptops or phones. We're talking about the big computer that took up the whole unit. So yeah, it's about educating. And yes, it's good to give them choice, but when we talk about boundaries, it's also good, I believe, for them to have boundaries too, and to understand the parameters so that they're getting choice within boundaries, which enables them to learn. Because the next question leads on really nicely, and we haven't rehearsed it to do this, it's just naturally progressed. Is it important to let a child know if their choice is not so good? I hear parents or teachers say, good choice, or it would have been better if you had. And I think there's always a place for positive feedback.
Yeah.
And let's be honest, I didn't like feedback. And even now there are times I don't want feedback. But if it's in a positive format,
Constructive.
Constructive, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's how we learn. If it's in a safe, nurturing environment. If someone's going to shout at me, or I've done a whole big thing, and they pick up on this thing, and they home in that thing, micromanage, that hurts.
Yeah. There's always ways and means of delivery, isn't there?
Absolutely, even from a young age.
Yeah.
And that word good choice, it's again, that's subjective, because is their choice good for them, but does it impact somebody else?
Yeah.
So, I understand why you made that decision to do that.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you had a good time, but this is how it left me feeling.
And sometimes, people, our loved ones, make choices and you go, oh, why did you do that? So again, we need to make sure there's no unconscious bias in the way that we are presenting. The better way of doing that is, oh, can you tell me why you made that choice? So we get their understandings. We're putting ourselves in their shoes for that moment to see why they come up with that choice, because there's often stuff that we don't understand because we don't know the full picture. We don't understand where they're coming from and why they're coming from that particular angle and made that decision.
Yeah, and another great way of saying it, even to don't underestimate a child of 3. They may not have all the language, but help me to understand how what was behind your choice.
Yeah. Charlie and I were talking about this the other day, about some of the clothing that she used to wear. And she was so awkward from my perspective back then with her clothing choice that I used to literally take her to Woolies and I go, right, you choose your socks, you choose your underwear, choose your clothing. Do you like this? Do you like that? What is it you want to wear? Because I thought if I got her in at the decision-making process,
yes,
she would wear the damn clothes. And so for example, we'd buy some shiny socks that glitter on them, whatever. I love them, Mum. Are you sure? Are you definitely going to wear them? Yes, Mum, I'm definitely going to wear them. So there I go. Oh, go and put your glitter socks on. Oh no, I don't like them. They itch. And I'm like, but you chose them.
Oh yeah, I'm not going to say
We've
that
all
everything.
been there, haven't we? We've all been there.
Yeah. On the other hand, when we're thinking about that age, I think about how much trainers cost. Let's use trainers as an example.
Yeah.
So what I would say is, well, this is the budget that there is for the trainers, for instance.
Yeah.
If you want other trainers outside of that budget and you've got some money from a birthday or from Christmas, or you think you can earn that money doing something, crack on.
Yeah.
That's your choice.
Yeah.
And what we're teaching, because what we're teaching then is they will get the consequences without us even having to say anything. Because if they've invested into a choice, and I'm emotionally, financially, in, you know, when they're older, if they choose not to wear them,
yeah, it's hit
yeah,
their pocket and they've had to think about it. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
So there's many ways we can teach children and young people about choice and boundaries, and that translates into safeguarding of themselves as well, because you're teaching them lessons of life lessons. That's what we're teaching them.
yeah, yeah.
So we've probably come up to our 30 minutes. Have you got anything else
Well, I have got
that this
one more
lady's
question.
asked? Yep.
Yes, I've got one more question. And just on that, as you were saying as well, because let's bring it back to abuse. I remember it was only, and I've spoken about this before, and I'll speak about it again, as a teenager who was being abused by my father, by my friend. And it was only when Auntie Helen, who ran the second children's home, sat down with me and educated me, as in, you know, self-respect, I always have choice, consent. And even then, yes, it was overwhelming that I suddenly realised what she was talking about. But what I will never say anything horrible. Now I'd like to be able to say to her, thank you, because what she actually gave me was the permission to have choice. So when I went, when I saw my dad the next time, I was able to say no.
Yeah.
And then, okay, the rest of it dealt with later. So I am a big advocate for choice, a big advocate. Right, the last question is, when asking a child about their feelings, are you inadvertently feeding them your ideas of how they are feeling if they find expression difficult? What's your thought before I say anything?
That was a very long question and it's just gone straight in my head and straight out again. So, but my initial thinking is, I think we need to make sure that we are listening and tapping into the child and what it is they are saying, not saying, might want to say. So we need to just maybe and listen.
Yes, but when I saw this also takes me back to when we went to Channel 4 and we were in the Q&A session, and there was the panel, and there was Jess, the
Phillips.
MP, Jess
Yeah.
Phillips on the
panel,
stage, on the panel, and she said it so well. She said, what is it that we can't ask our children about how they feel?
Yeah. Yeah.
What is
Why
it
can't we?
What is it we're scared of hearing? And for me, that is the biggest thing. What is it that adults are scared of hearing when they sit there and they give a child space? And they might say nothing, or how was, I mean, typical one, how was school today? Yeah, okay. What did you do? Nothing. So this is where I've always put in best and worst. What's your best of the day? What's your worst of the day?
Yeah.
Because you've given them an opportunity to speak out, and then it's there for storing, but they're getting to express themselves. And then sometimes, sorry.
No, going back to those school conversations, you're right. How was school? All right. What did you eat? Nothing. Well, I'm sorry, you must have eaten something because I know you had lunch, whether it be packed lunch or a school lunch. So what did you eat? So I used to literally drill down with the questions. So yes, I am asking them the questions that I want answers to, but what I was trying to do was get them to open up and have that conversation by giving them a few examples. I didn't really want to know what they were eating for lunch. I didn't really want to know how their school day had been. Like, you know, I did history and I did maths and I did English. I didn't want to know that. What I wanted to really know is, who did you play with? Was you treated kindly? And did you play with people and were you kind to them? That's what I really wanted to ask.
Yeah.
Without asking it.
And that's why I like best and worst, even for young children. And one of the best things about best and worst, it's simple. What's been the best of your day? What's been the worst of the day? And, you know, my sister's granddaughter. She's only 5, but just turned 5. I mean, she, even at 4, she latched onto that concept so that she initiates it. And it's really great because it gives her the opportunity. She doesn't like going home. So as adults, we realised, and then we're able to vocalise, oh, my worst hasn't happened yet. It will be when we all have to go home. And then she was able to say, oh, when it became her time, my worst hasn't happened yet. I could, you know, that kind of way. Not feeding them, but you're enabling them, you're teaching them how to express.
Yeah.
But the hardest thing is sitting back and just allowing that space, not rushing them.
Yeah. I always found that we would have that initial conversation, and when I shut up and was thinking about something else, like what we're going to have for dinner, you know, all the mundane stuff, she would then, or he would then go, bleh. And I'm like, I ain't got time to listen to you now because I've got to cook dinner. So I just thought, right, there's the learning there. They're going to talk when I do this. So somehow I've got to change that up a little bit.
Yeah. Or for some children, they may want to colour. You know, I'm a big advert for colouring.
Yeah.
You know, because it's, you know, what colours are they using? Are they using all greys and browns and blacks? You know, and you know, today the weather is grey and I'm tired, and we're both tired.
Yeah.
And if I was colouring now, my colours would be the colours. And then there's an area that you can ask, oh, you know, what are those colours that you're using? So we don't have to inadvertently feed them with our ideas. We can ask. But what we're doing is that we're encouraging. Doesn't always happen. You know, even when they become adults, they won't always engage until they're ready. But if you keep, as someone said once, parent line, because I worked with Parent Line years ago, and I said it's a bit like feeding a bird. Just put your hand out with a little bit of food, you know, just ask a few little questions and just wait patiently and allow them to come to you. And I've never forgotten that. It's like, oh, that's a really good scenario.
Yeah. Mine always finds me when it's feeding time, always.
Well,
I don't really see them unless there's an issue. You know, go, Mum, can you do it, Mum? Yes.
And for anyone listening as well, please don't think that we are the perfect parents.
No.
You know, 100%. We're giving a perspective, and you know, when we've done these things, we've done it in a way with our best intentions. If I was to know what I know now and go back, would I change some things? Absolutely, I would.
Yeah, absolutely. But life's about learning, isn't it? And putting right if you've gone wrong. That's the learning.
And being able to put your hand up. And Gabor Mate writes about that in his books about parenting, because each child is parented differently, not because we do it intentionally, it's because of where we are at that stage in the life, and also where they come within the family.
The family order, yeah, definitely. All right, well, we have to wrap up for today, I'm afraid. So I am going to say goodbye, everybody, and see you in the next Have You Got 5 Minutes?
And I'd like to say thank you to this person. I will be letting her know that we've answered her questions and sent it to her. If anybody else wants to ask us a question, you can email breakingthecycletostepforward@gmail.com. The link will be underneath anyway. And we look forward to more questions. Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone. See you soon.